Have you ever stopped to think what you would do if you suddenly became a burden to your own family? It's hard to imagine, but it was that very phrase, "you're just a burden," that changed everything in my life. Until that day, I thought my 75 years were a source of pride, not shame. I remember the smell of coffee in the kitchen, the books on the shelf, my older sister's voice echoing in the mornings. Suddenly, all of that was taken from me. I didn't even have time to choose what to take when they decided I no longer fit in. Flashes of that night still haunt me. My son-in-law's icy gaze, my daughter-in-law's forced smile, my grandchildren avoiding my gaze. Being called a burden hurt not only from their lips, but from the silence that followed. But for you to understand what brought me down, I need to show you what my routine was like. I lived in the same house for 53 years. It wasn't big, but every corner told a part of my story. It was on a quiet street in São Bento do Sul, Santa Catarina, one of those cities where time passes slowly. I bought that lot in 1970 when I got married. Back then, the neighborhood was made up of cobblestone streets and there were almost no cars. I remember exactly the morning the move arrived. 20 cardboard boxes, an old stove, and 2 mattresses. It took my husband and I a whole month just to paint the walls and hang the shelves he made himself. After he left in 2005, I stayed there alone, but I never truly felt alone. I had my routine. I woke up before 6, made coffee, and opened the kitchen window to let the smell of fresh bread mingle with the morning air. My day always started the same, with a quiet conversation with the photo of my older sister, Miriam, whom I lost in 1983. The frame sat on the end table, next to her rocking chair. It was automatic. I greeted Miriam every day, told her the weather, and sometimes, on the hardest days, asked her to look after me. The room was stacked high on the shelves with books. I taught math at the state school for over 30 years, and I had a habit of saving every notebook my students gave me at the end of the year. At the back of the shelf was even a wooden box filled with old exam papers from 1992, yellowed paper smelling of chalk and teenage sweat. My most precious possession was Miriam's rocking chair. She sat there every night to sew or just listen to the radio, and I never let anyone touch that chair, not even my grandchildren. Everyone knew that space was hers, even after all this time. The kitchen had a hand-embroidered tablecloth my mother made in 1969 before she passed away. The dishes were all different, some chipped, coming from the linens my mother-in-law gave me. On the cupboard door, I pasted old notes, shopping lists, and recipes my schoolmates taught me. I even had a small battery-operated radio, the kind that runs on 2 small batteries. I used it to listen to the news while I prepared lunch, always at 11:30, even when I was alone. Outside, the garden was simple but well-tended. Beneath the window grew a mint plant, an inheritance from Miriam. When she was sick, it was there that I would sit with her to sunbathe and talk, trying to dispel the fear that came with each doctor's visit. After she passed, I maintained the habit of watering those plants every day, as if that gesture would help me remember. I also had an antique wardrobe, bought in 1976, filled with dresses stored in color order, shoes that no longer fit but that I couldn't bring myself to donate. Each item had a story. The living room rug, for example, I bought for our 40th wedding anniversary. The wall clock made a loud noise, ticking away each hour as if to remind me that time is unforgiving. I never went out much. I liked staying home, especially after I retired. I read old newspapers, crocheted, and organized photos of my students. Sometimes neighbors would knock on the gate to ask for help with a difficult bill or to invite me in for tea. But most days, it was just me and my story inside that house. The loss wasn't just the address. I lost the freedom to choose what to do with my time, to open the window to feel the wind, to sit in my favorite armchair and talk to Miriam. I lost the feeling that I was still part of something bigger than myself. I was ripped from that place without warning, as if my entire history could be packed into 2 small suitcases and forgotten somewhere. What no one understands is that each object left behind was a piece of who I was. And when the door of that house closed for the last time, I felt as if every picture had been erased from my memory. If someone asked me what the worst part was, I wouldn't know if it was leaving the books, Miriam's chair, or just the smell of coffee in the morning. But I know that nothing can prepare a person for the emptiness of seeing their entire life fit into 2 suitcases and a plastic bag of documents. It was that day that I realized it wasn't just the house that had been left behind. It was who I had been for 53 years, and everything that came after, well, no one, not even me, was ready for what happened. Now I want to hear from you. What object in your life carries your story? If one day you were forced to leave everything behind, what would you never be able to abandon? Write in the comments. And have you ever experienced a moment when you felt like someone was erasing your memory, your story, your existence? Tell me about it. I want to know how you coped or what you would do in my place. What came after that day changed everything I understood as loss, and only those who have been through it know the weight of seeing your life reduced to so little. It wasn't overnight. The atmosphere inside the house changed slowly, almost imperceptibly, like when the temperature drops and you only realize you're cold when you start shivering. The first sign was when they started hiding their conversations. I'd walk into the kitchen and the whispers would stop. My son-in-law, Raphael's gaze grew increasingly distant. My daughter-in-law, Patricia, began treating me with that overly polite tone that only serves to show you're bothering her. At first, it was small, indirect remarks, dishes left out of place, the grocery list getting shorter. Later, comments came about the cost of maintaining the house, my health, how I demanded too much attention. I pretended not to hear. We fool ourselves because we prefer to believe our family will never turn their backs. But the truth is, the coldness comes sooner than we imagine. The situation was becoming untenable. On a Tuesday in September 2023, I heard Raphael talking on the phone in the hallway, complaining that his mother-in-law can't even take care of herself, let alone the house. My stomach churned. In the following days, frequent visits from a real estate agent began, with hushed conversations about sales and papers scattered across the living room table. At dinner time, no one spoke to me, and when I tried to make conversation, Patricia glanced at her watch as if she were wasting time. One night, while washing the dishes, I heard the children playing in the living room. My youngest grandson, Arthur, asked his sister, "Why does Grandma live here? Doesn't she have a home?" And before I could think of an answer, I heard Patricia say, loud enough for me to hear, "Because no one wants to take care of people who are nothing but trouble." This wasn't an accident. She wanted me to hear. The following Sunday, September 24th, everyone was in the living room. It was supposed to be just a family lunch, but the atmosphere was awkward. The dishes were served, but no one was smiling. It was on that day that Raphael, without looking me in the eye, spoke for the first time. "Don't you realize you've become a burden?" There was no argument. He looked at Patricia, who simply nodded. They didn't speak loudly, they didn't shout, but they also didn't wait for my opinion. They began listing reasons, talking about expenses, my health, the need for space. They even mentioned the children's well-being. The decision was already made before I even understood what was happening. I went to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and tried to remember when I stopped being part of the family and became a problem. I looked around, counting the belongings I still had. I was told to pack only the essentials. "Take only what fits in these 2 suitcases," said Patricia, pushing the already swollen zipper. The last few hours there were long. None of my grandchildren showed up to say goodbye. I heard muffled laughter coming from the hallway, people organizing boxes, rummaging through drawers. I spent the night awake, lying there, feeling the texture of the old rosary between my fingers. It had been with me since 1973, a gift from my husband for our wedding anniversary. I slept hugging it, trying not to think about the next day. The departure was silent, without a speech or goodbye. On Monday morning, September 25th, Raphael parked the car at the door and put my bags in the trunk, without looking at me. The drive to the nursing home was silent. There was no soundtrack, no conversation. I stared out the window, trying to memorize every streetlight, every corner, knowing it was the last time I would see the city like that. When we stopped in front of the gate, my legs felt weak. The building was old, painted beige, with a rusty metal sign at the entrance, "Solar Residential for the Elderly." The gate opened slowly, creaking, and a woman in a lilac uniform came to get me. The smell of disinfectant filled the air. I felt a bitter taste in my mouth, a slight nausea, and a desire to ask to go back. The receptionist took my documents, confirmed my name and age, and explained the rules of the place as if reading a manual. Each room had 2 beds, a small closet, and a window overlooking the courtyard. There was no privacy, only rules. Breakfast at 7, lunch at noon, dinner at 6. Each resident could have up to 3 visitors per week, as long as they scheduled them. I felt the cold tile floor on my feet, and for the first time, I understood what it was like to have nowhere to go. My world, which had always fit into a house full of memories, now fit into 8 square meters. As I walked to my room, I realized no one was looking me in the eye. The other residents seemed like ghosts, passing slowly, in no hurry to get anywhere. I sat up in bed, tucked the rosary under my pillow, and looked around. That was it. What came next was something no one expected. Neither was I. With every detail of this day, you feel the weight of rejection right along with me. Like now, it'll help this story reach more people. And subscribe, because the worst is just beginning. As I sat on that bed, I stared at the white ceiling, listening to noises in the hallway that made no sense to me. At first, I tried counting the hours to see if time would pass faster. Each minute took a while. Sometimes I found myself staring at the small mirror hanging on the wall, as if hoping to find some reason to get up. It was a place without the smell of home, without any trace of me, just that smell of forced cleaning that doesn't hide the abandonment. The coffee was thin, served in blue plastic cups promptly at 7 o'clock. The bread was sometimes cold. Lunch was a colorless, almost tasteless mess, served on scratched metal trays, with the sound of silverware clanging echoing through the dining room. At night, the food was always soup, little food, and little conversation. No one asked anyone's name. Everyone seemed to have forgotten how to care. The hallways were dimly lit by yellow light. After 10 at night, the silence was so heavy that the most common sound was slippers shuffling and doors creaking slowly. Sometimes I'd wake to slow footsteps or someone coughing in the next room. The cold was constant. In winter, the sheets wouldn't do, the wind cutting through the cracks in the old windows. My joints ached more than at home. My body always curled up, trying to retain some warmth. I saw other residents sitting, staring into space, fiddling with necklaces, holding dolls, waiting for phone calls that never came. A woman named Teresa spent her mornings on the porch, whispering dates and names to herself, trying to grasp some memory from the past. Another, Lourdes, liked to line up invisible cups on the dining room table, stirring the air as if she were still serving coffee to her family. I saw women younger than me there, already motionless, just waiting for time to pass. It seemed no one there had any more stories to tell. I also avoided conversation. For the first month, I didn't receive a single call. I watched all the visits from the other inmates, rare, brief, happen through the thick glass of the reception area, a low table separating people who no longer knew what to say to each other. It's not a place made for conversation. No one asks if you're okay, because the answer never matters. The staff hurried past, asking if anyone wanted pain medication, clearing trays and changing sheets. Everything was done quickly, automatically. I began to wonder if it still mattered whether I was there or not. I got up every day, grabbed the rosary I'd kept under my pillow, and held it tightly. The number of days only grew. 26 nights slept on that thin mattress, 26 times waking in the dark, trying to remember the smell of my home. I lost count after 32 days. The clock on the wall never kept the right time. One day, I looked at it. It read 9:15, but when I asked the assistant, she said it was still 8 o'clock. There, time doesn't matter, it drags on. The lights go out early, but sleep doesn't come. The rosary was my only link to everything that was left behind. It wasn't about religion. It was just the last reminder of what my life truly was. When fear gripped me, I would take the rosary in my hand and count the beads, trying to remember every birthday, every Christmas, every conversation with my sister. I didn't ask anyone for anything. I just wanted to feel that this was still mine. I'd never been one to pray out loud, but there was the one place where no one could take that away from me. On my worst days, I wondered if I would ever be remembered as someone worthy again, or if everyone who knew me had already forgotten me. What no one tells you is that losing your home, your belongings, your photos, all of it weighs heavily, but losing your own importance is far worse. There, I felt buried before my time. And every night, with every tray pushed under the door, with every absence, I wondered how someone can carry on when they feel erased from the world. The silence of the asylum isn't just the absence of sound. It's the emptiness of realizing that no one is waiting for you to say anything, that no one wants to hear your voice. I stared at my hands, trying to remember if there was still any strength left within. And it was in that silent time, between the tiny faith and the cold, that I began to understand that, no matter how much the world insists, we don't disappear easily. That's when, without warning, a new need arises, to prove that we still exist. And this need made me see the asylum with new eyes, even though I didn't know at the time where it would lead. It was slowly, almost without realizing it, that I began to see my surroundings differently. The first week, everything was an uncomfortable novelty, but soon the routine at the elderly home became so repetitive that every unusual detail jumped out at me. I spent a lot of time sitting in the cafeteria, observing the movements of the staff. I noticed that the nurses always turned the key to the medicine cabinet at the same time, after breakfast, at 7:25. They stored the doses in transparent boxes labeled with each patient's name, locked everything in a light blue drawer, and wrote everything down in a red hardcover notebook. If someone missed a medication, they marked an X next to their name. I began to memorize where each key hung. Usually, the main one was attached to the waist of Mrs. Marta, the shift coordinator, along with a noisy keychain bearing 4 small St. Benedict medals. I also noticed that the linen closet was always unlocked after 2 p.m., and that the staff never checked to make sure the blankets were all in place. Sometimes they'd leave doors ajar and disappear for several minutes, busy with other residents who required more attention. There, anyone who doesn't make a sound is left out. It was the kind of carelessness that would drive me crazy at home, but here, it became an opportunity to keep my head clear. My biggest concern was protecting what little I had left. When I left, I managed to hide a sum of small bills, folded inside a manila envelope, along with a bank receipt dated August 3, 2023. I hid the envelope inside the rosary's cover, which from the outside looked like just an old box. This rosary became my portable safe. I also folded a piece of paper with 2 important passwords and a phone number written in small print inside. Every night before bed, I checked to make sure everything was still there. The books I brought were few, 3 novels and an old Portuguese dictionary. They kept my mind occupied. When I finished reading, I'd start doing crossword puzzles in a small notebook I'd stolen as soon as I discovered a pad of forgotten paper in the game room. I'd jot down not only the words, but also times, staff names, little things no one else paid attention to. If the hallway doorbell rang twice in a row, I knew it was a visitor. If it rang just once, I was called for medicine. I created my own system to keep time from engulfing me. In the second month, I began to notice other women who also didn't fit in with the resignation. One of them, Mrs. Vera, always sat at the head of the table and stared at the door as if expecting someone to arrive at any moment. One day, she struck up a conversation by asking if I knew how to use a bank account. I remained silent, but I noticed she also kept a folded envelope inside a book. Little by little, I grew closer. I exchanged glances with Maria Alice, who kept a stack of old photographs hidden in the lining of her purse. Over time, we began to help each other. We shared information. We warned each other when someone from outside showed up asking too many questions. I never showed weakness, even when I felt like screaming. I was discreet, but I made it clear that I wouldn't accept being treated as invisible. If someone asked to change seats or wanted to borrow an extra blanket, I explained that everything had an owner, that each thing there had a story, even if no one wanted to hear. The rosary became my amulet and my hiding place. One rainy night, I noticed the string was looser than usual. I opened it slowly and removed the rolled-up paper with my savings account password, checking it number by number with a blue pen I'd taken from the office. I hid everything again before breakfast without arousing suspicion. No one there really knew me, but some women began to trust me. Each week, I sat next to a different one, listening to stories, exchanging little tips on how to deal with the aides, what to order for lunch, who was the most patient in nursing. We formed, without speaking, a small group of silent resistance. It wasn't friendship, it was survival. With every glance exchanged, every secret shared, I felt my strength slowly returning. But the more I learned about that place and those people, the more I realized that life there was made of small traps. And what seemed safe the day before could become a threat the next day. That's when I understood that being alert would be my only chance. Trust between us didn't come easily. It took almost 2 months for someone to whisper what everyone there already knew. Objects were disappearing. Clothes were changing hands. Even rings and earrings mysteriously vanished from one week to the next. When Donna Vera lost the wristwatch she'd kept since her wedding, the topic stuck in everyone's mind. It was in this climate of distrust that I began to strike up longer conversations in the garden after lunch, always with a cup in hand to disguise it. It was there, sitting under the shelter of the mango tree, that the first stories emerged. One told of the bracelet that never returned from the laundry, another about an envelope of money that evaporated after a technical visit. Nothing was resolved, no one took responsibility, but it became clear that if we depended solely on the asylum's rules, we would all be defenseless. In the beginning, there were 4 of us: Vera, Maria Alice, Lourdes, and I. We always met at the same time, 15 minutes before afternoon snack, while the assistants were busy preparing meals in the kitchen. Each of us began secretly writing down what we observed: staff schedules, visitor behavior, missing items, and the names of the most vulnerable residents. I created a list of the names of the residents who had reported losses and divided it into simple codes so no one would understand if it fell into the wrong hands. We always disguised the notes as medication lists or appointment reminders. My teaching experience helped me organize the group. I divided the tasks. One was responsible for observing visitors, another for noting who entered or left the rooms during shift changes. I agreed on signals. 3 quick knocks on the table warned of unusual activity. A handkerchief hanging from the window alerted to possible searches. We began hiding valuables in unlikely places: inside torn cushions, in the bottoms of old shoes, behind loose tiles in the shared bathroom. We made makeshift maps with poorly drawn pictures that only we could understand. I even started teaching memorization techniques and simple codes during reading time so no one would get confused. I taught how to fold a note to look like any other piece of paper, how to camouflage small keys using duct tape on the lining of a drawer. Over time, other elderly women began to approach. The group grew to 8, then 11. Everyone had a similar story: people torn from their homes by hasty relatives, women who lost everything overnight and now fought for small, daily victories. The atmosphere in the nursing home changed. Some aides became suspicious, noticing that it was no longer so easy to intimidate those at the end of the hallway. But we were careful. We never left a trail. We arranged times and exchanged information using common phrases without arousing suspicion. One afternoon, Maria Alice called me to talk in the backyard, where no one ever went. She showed me a small metal box containing 3 wedding rings, 2 bracelets, and an antique brooch. She asked for help hiding it, as she had already lost 2 earrings and didn't want to risk losing the rest. I took the box and suggested a hiding place in the cleaning supplies closet, where almost no one went, so we created our safety net. The secret was to never trust the obvious, never repeat the hiding place, and always warn the others before making any unusual move. Deep down, we knew that this secret club was more than a safety net. It was also a way to challenge the system that tried to erase our existence. I discovered that teaching these women to defend themselves was not much different from teaching math to rebellious teenagers. It required patience, clarity, and a little creativity. And that's precisely why the suspense grew. Each small victory showed that however forgotten we were, we still had control over what was ours. But the bigger the club, the greater the risk. And the greater the risk, the greater the tension. No one outside had any idea what was about to happen. The club grew, but with it came new risks. The more people knew about the hiding places, the greater the chance of someone slipping up. One Thursday afternoon, almost everything fell apart. Lourdes was helping Vera change her clothes when she decided to check if her envelope was still safe. She didn't notice that one of the assistants, Saida, was in the hallway with the cleaning cart. Vera coughed to get attention, but it was too late. Lourdes pulled the envelope from her coat pocket and reflexively let the paper fall to the floor. The scene lasted seconds, but to me it felt like an eternity. Saida looked, hesitated, but continued collecting trash as if she hadn't seen anything. Still, after she left, tension took over. I gathered them both in the courtyard and explained that no one could be trusted and that the slightest mistake could cost them dearly. Lourdes remained silent, clutching the envelope tightly, and simply shook her head. After that scare, I decided to increase my vigilance. I only shared essential information and checked all the hiding places. I even spent the night awake, listening for noises in the hallway. imagining 1,000 ways I could be discovered. The feeling of being watched became routine. My mouth went dry whenever anyone on the team looked at me too much. Maria Alice asked to hide some of her jewelry in my locker, but I refused. It was clear that if even one person failed, the entire group would pay. The tension didn't just come from the fear of losing things. What kept me awake at night was the knowledge that if something went wrong, it wasn't just my dignity that would be at stake. I began writing everything down in an old notebook hidden inside a bread bag, cataloging the dates, who kept what, who visited whom. It was like keeping a secret inventory, each name an extra responsibility. The fatigue began to build. One night I found myself sitting up in bed at 3 a.m, listening to footsteps on the other side of the door and praying quietly that they wouldn't hear my breathing. The fear of losing documents and money became an obsession. I knew I wouldn't have another chance if anything was confiscated. I was afraid that if I were caught, they wouldn't even be able to prove those things were actually ours. The asylum's regulations stated that any valuables had to be declared upon entry and stored in the management safe. But in practice, those who did this never saw their belongings returned. Those who accepted the rule lost. It was that simple. One morning, while having coffee with Vera, I overheard 2 employees talking in the break room. One of them, in a tired voice, commented, "There's a smart alecky old woman who thinks she's in charge here. Be careful, they'll get to her eventually." That hit me hard. My hands felt cold and a weight on my chest. I remained silent for the rest of the day, retracing every step I took, trying to figure out who might have said too much or if someone was already being closely watched. The atmosphere among the group grew more tense, conversations limited to gestures, glances, and short notes. I wondered what I would do if someone were pressured, if someone decided to spill the beans to avoid punishment. I became even less trusting of everything and everyone. I checked the rosary's hiding place every night, sometimes twice before bed. I mentally repeated the passwords, checked the inventory, and mapped out escape routes in case I needed to act quickly. It was during this period that I understood the magnitude of the risk. I was responsible not only for myself, but for an entire network of people who depended on that plan to continue feeling worthy. The nights grew longer. Sleep didn't come easily. With every strange noise in the hallway, I imagined someone rummaging through my belongings, reading the papers, destroying whatever dignity remained of those women. The routine, which once provided security, was now a constant threat. Fear became a daily companion, and yet I continued. I thought I was in control, that every step was calculated, but time would show that inside there, nothing was as safe as it seemed. I thought I had everything under control, but I was completely wrong. The invitation arrived 15 days early. A colorful, printed piece of paper with large letters announced the 30th anniversary of the elderly manor. Families invited to a special morning with music, cake, and tributes. It was the first time in months I'd seen the word family in anything other than memories. In the days leading up to the event, the atmosphere changed. Staff swept the hall more often, hung cheap ribbons from the windows, and set off balloons. The radio played oldies softly, and conversations among the residents revolved around what to wear, who would come, what to say, or what to keep quiet. I woke early that Saturday, May 20th, 2024. The main hall was improvisedly decorated. Flowery plastic tablecloths, paper flags, a large cake table. At 9:30, the first visitors began arriving. I saw Vera adjusting her white hair, Lourdes in a lilac dress, Maria Alice with the golden brooch we had recovered weeks before. The group was prepared. Each knew their role. Every movement had been secretly rehearsed. The staff feigned friendliness, but they eyed us with the suspicion of someone who knows something is amiss. It was only a matter of time before they noticed. I sat in the corner, rosary in hand, and mentally reviewed each step of the plan. I glanced at the family table, saw my son-in-law and daughter-in-law sitting next to their grandchildren, chuckling softly, as if the nursing home were a theater and we were extras. I saw other sons and daughters, all waiting to hear words of gratitude, perhaps a forced thank you. What would come would be something else. When the coordinator called for silence before giving her speech, I was overcome by an unexpected calm. I stood up slowly, excused myself, and approached the microphone. I felt everyone's gaze on me, a weight I hadn't felt since childhood when I had to present essays at school. My voice came out steady, unhurried. I began by explaining that, in the months I spent there, I'd seen more than just parties and cakes. I told her about the missing objects: Vera's watch, Maria Alice's brooch, the bracelets, the stolen savings. I spoke about the fearful routine, the care taken with every penny, the effort we made to hide even the smallest memories. Then I pulled a list from my skirt pocket: names, dates, missing items. I handed one copy to the coordinator, another to a visitor filming everything with her cell phone. I said, looking the director in the eye, "I have evidence saved, photos, receipts, and names. If you try to deny it, everyone here will know the truth." There was a commotion. One of the staff members tried to interrupt me, but I continued. I took the envelope containing copies of conversations, lists of belongings we'd kept, even a secret video showing an assistant taking money from Lourdes' drawer. Then I turned to the family table. My voice lowered, but each syllable seemed to carry more weight. I spoke of the documents they'd hidden, the missing gifts, the manipulation so many suffered from their sons, daughters-in-law, and sons-in-law. I said that each woman's life there was made of choices, of dignity, of history. And that, even surrounded, we weren't invisible. The silence was absolute. I saw wide eyes, red faces, people fiddling with their phones, not daring to get up. Finally, I looked at everyone, took a deep breath, and said what I needed to. They laughed at me when they called me a burden, but that day, it was my voice that echoed. The applause came slowly, from within the group, until it spread throughout the room. There, for a moment, no one could erase who we were. The room fell silent after my last sentence. From the small makeshift stage, I could see the confusion etched on the relatives' faces. Some tried to hide their laughter. Others pretended not to understand. But the mood was impossible to ignore. Family members who had always treated visits as an obligation now stared at the floor, unable to face their mothers and grandmothers. I saw my daughter-in-law nudge her son-in-law, whispering something in his ear, as if a quick apology could erase everything. But there was no more room for empty explanations. Everything had been said, and it was impossible to unsee. In the corner of the room, the applause grew louder. First, it came from the elderly women who knew firsthand the fear of losing even their names. Then it came from visitors, and even 2 new assistants who had never seen anything like it there. Some women wept softly, others stood up and, even with difficulty, came to shake my hand. I saw Vera smiling for the first time in months. Maria Alice hugged me tightly, and Lourdes, her eyes closed, kept repeating, "Now they know." Within minutes, staff were called into the principal's office. The pale-faced director asked everyone to wait. One of the social investigators monitoring the event called the police. No one left the room. The doors were closed until everyone had given their statements. I felt a strange relief, mixed with fear of retaliation. But something changed there. For the first time since entering the nursing home, I didn't feel reduced to a problem. I felt respect returning, not because of force or threats, but because I'd shown that even a group of women no one wanted to listen to could still make a splash. The following days were marked by visits from social workers, psychologists, and city officials. They collected statements, took photos, and searched closets. The older, once confident employees now looked away. Those who had laughed now avoided passing me in the hallways. In less than 2 weeks, 4 assistants were dismissed on suspicion of theft. The home's coordinator was replaced. A new board with stricter rules appeared in the main hallway. And most importantly, they returned some of the lost belongings: a watch, a bracelet, even a photo album Maria Alice thought she'd never see again. My family tried to explain. I received calls, messages, even flowers. I heard apologies that didn't come from the heart. I heard promises that this will never happen again. But none of these words changed the past. I didn't forget the abandonment, nor what I lost, but for the first time in many years, I felt proud of what I had done. I felt that the dignity, which had been denied me for so long, had returned to me. Respect didn't come with shouting. It came with courage, the courage to face it, to speak out in public, to refuse the shame they tried to impose on me. Some nights were still difficult. The silence still came. But now it brought a kind of peace. I knew I had done something greater than simply reacting. I had paved the way for other voices, shown that no woman needed to silently accept her own exclusion. It was justice, not revenge. The nursing home changed after that. Visits increased, new staff arrived. Other elderly women began to trust more, to ask for help, to complain when they felt ignored. I was never treated like a burden again. And if I ever am again, I know that my voice and that of so many others will not be so easily silenced. After all this, I find myself thinking about what truly remains when they take almost everything from you. It's not the objects, nor the walls of an old house, nor even the family title. What remains are the memories, the small victories, and every moment we refused to disappear. I look at the old rosary, worn in the corners, and remember how many times I clung to it, not because I believed in easy miracles, but because it was the only thing that had carried me through every phase of my life, from childhood to marriage, from the cramped room in the nursing home, to the day my voice was finally heard. I didn't let them take the last part of me. I learned from my sister, Miriam, when I was little. Dignity is not asked for, it is protected. She taught me never to bow my head in the face of injustice, even when everything seemed to be falling apart. On the darkest days, I thought of her sitting in the rocking chair, insisting that life is worth more than any offense or loss. I know I won't recover everything that was taken, but no one can convince me that my story was in vain. Everyone has the right to be remembered, to be treated with respect, to keep their secrets and achievements without fear. The pain doesn't disappear, but today it no longer dictates what I think of myself. I chose to be remembered not as a burden, but as someone who stood tall when everything was pushing me down. I learned that there's no shame in asking for help, fighting for justice, or demanding respect. The shame is remaining silent when they want to erase you. I look ahead without knowing exactly what comes next. I'm 75 years old, but I've discovered there's still a future for those who refuse to be forgotten. The elderly manor now has more visitors, more voices, more people believing they can be heard. And if they ever try to silence me again, I already know the way back. The old rosary stays with me, not as a promise of a miracle, but as a reminder of everything I've experienced, of what I didn't let go. And if anyone hears my story now, I want them to remember this. No one has the right to tell you what you're worth. Only you know what you've built. Only you decide what you deserve. So now it's your turn. I want to know, what would your reaction be if you were in my shoes? Would you have had the courage to face it, to speak out in front of the person who hurt you the most? Comment below now. I don't accept being erased. Write your response, your story, your account in the comments. Have you ever experienced a situation in which someone tried to take away your value? Tell us here. Your voice deserves to be heard too. It's in this space, in the comments, that the true power of these stories reveals itself. I know this story resonated with you because it speaks to everything that's most human about us. The desire to be respected, the fear of being forgotten, the need to never give up what's ours. There's nothing more real than fighting to remain someone, even when the world tries to push you into a corner. Stories like this can't be ignored because they mirror what can one day happen in anyone's life. Here, each person is the protagonist of their own story. Leave a comment. Declare your strength. Write, I don't accept being erased, because when you declare this publicly, you inspire others not to accept less than they deserve. Like the video now, the impact you felt deserves to be shared. Each like helps this story reach more people, gives a voice to those who have been through something similar, and reinforces that no one is alone in this fight for respect. You're already part of this story just by getting this far. Subscribe to the channel now. Here, you'll find real stories of survival, of overcoming obstacles, of people who push their limits and show that the impossible is just the beginning. Turn on notifications because each new video is an experience that will challenge you, make you rethink everything, and strengthen who you are. Don't let these stories go unnoticed. Share them, tag those who need to hear them, and strengthen this chain of courage and truth. Now don't stop here. What happened in this story was just the beginning. There's a next video waiting for you, and what you're about to see will challenge everything you believe about the impossible. Get ready, because this experience isn't over. The next video is already on screen. Click now and come with me to discover what lies on the other side of fear, loss, and overcoming. You won't want to miss what's to come. Watch now.